Good afternoon. I want to welcome each one of you here to the McDonald Road Seventh-day Adventist Church. We're so glad to see each one of you. And we're in for, I think, a wonderful treat, learning lots of good things that we need to keep our brains healthy. And so we're very grateful to have Dr. George Guthrie here again. And he's going to be speaking on dementia. As you can see the slide here, he is a retired family practice physician and lives in the area now, and we're just blessed to have him. Before we turn the time over to him, I just want to give a few announcements, and that is that there are still some spots for a cooking school that will be held here at this church at 3 o'clock tomorrow in the fireside room. So you can go to the website and sign up. So that's tomorrow. There's a flyer that lists several other ministries on it. If you're interested, of course, we do put them there. They should be on the health ministry webpage as well. And so those two announcements I wanted to make sure that you're aware of. Again, we're very grateful that you're here, and I'd like to ask us to bow our heads for prayer, and then we will get started. Our dear Heavenly Father, we do thank you for the Sabbath day, for today, for all the blessings that you have given us. We ask for your presence to be here in a special way, that we will understand, give us the wisdom that we need, help us to know what we can do for ourselves and for our families. I ask that you will give Dr. Guthrie words to speak that will lift you up and be a blessing to each one of us. We thank you for the gifts and talents that you've given us, and especially Dr. Guthrie and his presentation today. So may we all bring you honor and glory, and we thank you in Jesus' precious name. Amen.
Hello. Glad you could come. Do I need to put the button? No? Yes? No? I've moved it on and off both, so hello. You can hear it now? You can see it on. Yeah. Okay, I give up. I'll leave that with the... now I can really hear myself. Now, please turn me down. So glad you could all come. It's a Sabbath afternoon. We're talking about something that I think affects many of us as we get older, as the gray hair comes. If nothing else, we've cared for parents or relatives whose minds have disappeared. We feel our own memories slipping, and it becomes a concern to us. We've kind of wondered, is it worse to lose your brain first or your body, right? And I've kind of had that argument in my brain. I think I want to keep my mind, but I want to keep my body too, right? My wife's mother lived with us for several years, 7 years or so. She died at 104, and she thought she lived too long. You know, all the friends are gone, the body functions got bad. So I don't have all the answers. I do know from inspiration that our brains were designed to continually grow eternally, right? So sin has done some numbers on us, and we live with that. How do we know how to keep our brains? How do we know what the truth is? I don't know about you. For some reason, I find myself looking on the internet, finding information, and they'll tell you can live this long, or you can fix your brain by doing this. And finding out what truth is can be a little bit of a problem. So there's a perspective that I've adopted through the years that may be helpful to you. Number one, the best way to find out what truth is from divine inspiration. Okay? Number two on the list is the scientific process. But the scientific process is very clumsy and very slow. 10 plus years to figure something out. And part of that process is scientists arguing, people with PhDs arguing, you're right, no, I'm right. I mean, it's just back and forth. That's the argument thing until it finally kind of is accepted. So that which divine revelation has not made crystal clear, the scientific process argues about. Beyond that, we have a plethora of other things. This happened to Aunt Nellie. Dr. John told me this. We've got all kinds of possibilities. Well, I took this and I got better, right? So those things don't always work. I was training young physicians before I retired, and I would tell them the trick of being a doctor is to give the patient the medicine just before they get well. I mean, there's that association. There's even that whole business of the placebo effect. You've heard about that? So if you think it'll make you better, it'll make you better. So the scientific process helps us to get that out. So if I'm going to talk to you today, this evening, this afternoon, about dementia, I really want to focus on the scientific process, what we have learned, recognizing that we're laying that on top of a foundation that is really divine revelation. And those of us who tend to go to the Seventh-day Adventist Church have an understanding of that really gives us some good advantages, and I am very thankful for those. So that's where I'm going to be going, and that brings up another interesting topic. I don't know who all is here, and I'm not going to ask the PhDs to raise their hands, right? So some of us, there's a wide range of understandings and experience in the scientific kind of process and community. So I am going to get a little deep for some of you, and I'm going to be a little superficial for others of you, okay? So we'll do our best to try to help everybody understand. Which brings up the next point. I am very happy to field questions. Now, apparently, this is being recorded, and if you have a question, I would be happy to acknowledge it when I get to an appropriate breaking point and share. If you'll say the question, and if it's short, we'll appreciate that, then I can repeat it for the folks who are maybe watching the recording, and then we can kind of move on. I prefer not to speak to a black hole. A black hole, everything falls into and nothing comes out. So I like to have a response from audience so I know you're thinking. If you've got a question, someone else does too, probably. One more thing about questions. Please don't ask about your specific disease or your relative's disease. We're really talking about the science. So if you have questions about what's being said, please ask those. Once the presentation to everybody is done, I'm happy to talk to people individually if you have individual questions. But let's not share those types of things in the general questions, okay? Does it sound like reasonable rules? Okay. Are we ready to dig in? Okay, here we go. First slide. Dementia, Alzheimer's disease, is the 7th leading cause of death in the country. You can kind of see things listed here. I last downloaded this in March of 2026. So we got heart disease, cancer, yes, COVID-19, accident, stroke, respiratory disease, and then Alzheimer's. So it's something that's important. It does lead to our bodies kind of falling apart in other ways as well. Now, this next slide is kind of a look at the scientific process. And I wanted you to at least understand it. So on the left, you see basic science or animal studies. Just because it works in a rat doesn't mean it works in a human, right? So we don't know for sure. Basic science is kind of in the lab, sometimes with animals and others. So that's kind of a starting place for the scientific process. Another place we look is for associations. So if you have a whole bunch of people, and let's see, here's an example of that. For example, if we have a bunch of people who are overweight and we look at how much diet soda they take, what are you going to know if you find out there's an association? People who are overweight eat more sodas. So is that because they're drinking diet soda? Is it the diet sodas that are doing it, or are they choosing to do it? Is the diet soda causative, or is it the person's other choices? So we don't know from these associations, but we start there when we start to do other studies, more in-depth studies. There's also another group, and this is observational as well, but it's looking forward, where questionnaires are given to people every 5, 10 years, sometimes 20 years, and over time look at their behaviors, and you can say, look, now over time, prospectively, we have very close associations. We can't prove it, but it looks even stronger now. So you'll see some of those studies as well. And then what we call the gold standard is the randomized controlled trial. So you see there the RCT, okay, randomized controlled trial. A little too long to get into space. So this is the slide that takes all the science that I'm going to talk about and kind of puts it in its place. The slide will come up again at the end of the lecture. So I put it at the beginning and at the end, okay? Now notice here, here's one that's zinc, and you see it there? So that's basic science or animal studies, but it's also in observational studies. And interestingly, we actually have randomized controlled trial on it. So you see this particular supplement has actually made it clear through the process. That's not true of all of them, but I wanted to let you know that there is this process. Okay, any questions so far? Yes, sir. Oh, now you're getting ahead of yourself. He says, how much zinc per day? So the recommendations are not more than 40 milligrams a day without a doctor's supervision. Okay. How much we actually need, that's a different story. And then what type of supplement, that's a different, but I'll show you the study when we get there. So that should be of interest to you. Okay, Southern Community Cohort Study. This was done in the South. It was done on people who were kind of on Medicare. And they, because they're on Medicare, they're getting doctor's diagnosis. So here you have risk of Alzheimer's and related disorders. So these folks, many of them on the Medicare rolls, with their data, were looked at to see what kind of associations there were. They looked at their behaviors, what they were doing, and controlled as best they could for age, for time of enrollment, to startup of the diagnosis, gender, race, education, income, so all the things they could manage from a mathematical standpoint. And when they looked at that, this is what they found. People who never smoked had protection. Now on the right there you see something that says HR. That stands for hazard ratio. So if the number is above 1, your risk is increased. If it's below 1, your risk is decreased. So you can see if you've never smoked, that would give you a protection, so 0.87, so that is somewhere around 13% reduction in risk. Physical activity is also protective. Look at that. Too much sleep or too little sleep are both associated with the Alzheimer's and related disorders. Then there's a healthy eating index. We can talk about that, I think, in the next slide. And then when you put all of them together, you can see it drops down to 0.68. So that's about a 72%, let me see if I can say it correctly, about a 32% protection by doing all of those things. Make sense? So it's an association. It doesn't prove things, but randomized controlled trials on diet over long periods of time are almost impossible to do. This gives us an idea that these things can make a difference. Now, here's a little bit about the healthy eating index, and I'm not going to try to show you all the details of it, but it includes things like greens and beans, foods that have healthy protein in them, for example, plant protein, Fatty acids, someone was asking about those essential fats like polyunsaturated fats and monounsaturated fats seem to be protective. And then things like trying to decrease the amount of refined grains and getting adequate amounts of fiber. So it's, in essence, a healthy diet as we understand it. We don't have to dig too far deep into that. So that's a little bit about diet and how it may affect, or really all of lifestyle, but diet as well. How many of you have heard that if you exercise your brain on a regular basis, you can help slow down the progression of dementia? Now, my father had heard that, and he always worked his crossword puzzles. Unfortunately, it didn't work completely. He got some dementia. So kind of worried about that. What do I do with my brain to keep it active? This particular study tries to find out exactly what that should be. Now notice that this one is a randomized controlled trial. So people were randomized into 3 different kinds of exercises. So people who were healthy older adults were randomized into memory type things, remembering what happened, etc. And then reasoning, so quizzes that got people reasoning, and then speed of processing. That would mean you got to do it quick, right? Got to do it quick. So it kind of forced people to move quickly. And then they waited for 10 years, and they tested them, of course, before and after. And they found that the speed of processing was much more potent, much more powerful. It was the one that was statistically significant. So working kind of those, to whatever it may be, having to make that decision quickly. Exactly how that comes out, I am not sure. As far as what kind of quiz would you do that, to actually do something quickly? All I can think of is Pac-Man, right? But I don't know that's what they used. But moving quickly, it can be important for that, making that decision. So that's encouraging to us. The memory and the reasoning didn't work quite as well and didn't reach statistical significance in these people. Well, here's another one. Inactivity. Now this is simply a cross-sectional observational study. What they did was they asked people how active they were. Do they do a lot of physical exercise, or are they sedentary? So they were asked their sedentary time, and then they were all going in to get an MRI. A lot of people go in to get an MRI for whatever the reason may be of their brain. So the radiologist said, well, let's find out about their exercise before they go in, and then we're going to measure the size of their hippocampus. Have you heard of the hippocampus? It sits at the base of the brain. It's kind of where our memory sits. The larger your hippocampus, the better your memory. As it shrinks, and it does as we get dementia, as we lose our memory, as we get older, if the brain is shrinking, that can shrink, and our memory tends to decline with that. So interestingly, they found that increasing the activity did not increase the volume, but if you increased your sitting during the day, you were actually decreasing the volume. So that was statistically significant, an association, not a randomized controlled trial. Does that make sense? Okay, so too much sitting is not good for us. Keeping active is a good idea. Now, there's been a lot written, a lot studied on exercise and dementia. This particular one is taken, what I'm summarizing for you is from a study looking at exercise and dementia done in 2020. Moderate and high intensity exercise are beneficial. Exercise provides protection for the brain, neuroprotective effects. And it appears to do that with antioxidant enzymes, with increased growth factors. See that BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factors, what that stands for. BDNF is the strongest stimulant we know of for this stimulus to make more nerve cells is actually exercise. So doing a moderate amount of exercise is, looks like I did something. There it came back. Okay. And then exercise decreased the amount of what we call reactive oxygen species. And you've probably heard of these as free radicals. They're kind of the extra electrons that can damage proteins and actually kill cells. Sustained attention, visual memory, frontal and cognitive function in mild to moderately severe Alzheimer's disease is improved with exercise. So you can, even once someone has dementia, if you can get them exercising, it can actually be used as a treatment as well. So that should be encouraging. Any questions about that? No? Yes, sir. I'm using them interchangeably, yes. There are many kinds of dementia. Alzheimer's is kind of the most common kind. We called it dementia, but it was hard to say my parent or my spouse has dementia. So Alzheimer's is putting a label on it that didn't have the emotional kind of hit. That was when it all started with Alzheimer's. They're fundamentally the same. There are other things that can cause dementia, but Alzheimer's is certainly the most common one. Good question. Thank you. So here's a study, a randomized control trial done with exercise in the YMCA. And they were looking at people with mild memory problems, so not severe. What they looked at was aerobic training. That's the stuff that you use oxygen, more like walking on the treadmill sort of a thing. And the other was using low-intensity stretching, balance, range of motion. So the easy type stuff, right? You're not actually huffing, you're not getting your heart rate up. And this was 12 months of supervision. They had excellent follow-up. Most people stayed with it. Certainly, supermajority did. Every 6 months they did this, it says ADAS, COG, executive, so that's like 3 different tests to look at dementia, see how it was doing. And interestingly, both of those, it didn't matter which one you were doing, both of them gave the same amount of improvement. That's encouraging, isn't it? Some of you don't like to think about sweat. I know my father-in-law believed sweat and sin were very close together. Some people just have a bit of a challenge getting out. Well, just doing the stretching type things may be beneficial for you from this randomized control trial. So that's encouraging. So what about resistance exercise? So resistance is more the weightlifting type. So on this particular study, another randomized control trial, reported in 2025, main outcome measure, risk of falls. That is, falling is bad news as we get older, right? You break a hip. Once you break a hip, your chances of dying are like 33%, something like that, within the next 6 months to a year. We don't like to fall. It really curbs us and it's painful, etc. So look at testing, see what happens. So the main outcome was risk of falls in something called the short physical performance battery. That is, the physical therapist actually put them through some physical exercises to see how they responded, balance type things. Secondary outcomes include muscle strength using a hand dynamometer, neuropsychiatric symptoms, so mental perspective, the fear of falling, and then the ability to perform the activities of daily living. So those were the things that were looked at as kind of secondary. The first one, of course, is risk of falls. And resistance exercise effectively decreased the risk of falls, the fear of falling, and even the psychiatric symptoms. And it improves muscle strength in people with Alzheimer's disease, both in the short term and the long term. So doing some resistant exercise does make sense, especially if you've got some of that balance stuff in with it. Your muscles are stronger, you've got more competence, you feel more competent, you're less likely to fall. So be active. Okay, let's switch and see what we can find. This is the Singapore Chinese Health Study. Singapore is run by a benevolent despot. They've got a good health system. And they try to work on scientific evidence for their governance as well as their health. So this is a study to try to look at the Chinese elderly population. You see 16,948 men and women age 45 to 74 at baseline. So their baseline is 1993 to 1998. They do follow-ups kind of every 10 to 20 years, right? So follow-up visits 2014 to 2016. They then did what's called the Mini Mental Status Exam, MMSE, and it was specially designed for the Asian population, those living in Singapore. So it was a Singapore modified. And they looked for dietary patterns within that group. Then they looked at these odd ratios, which is like hazard ratios, with confidence intervals to tell which was the healthiest diet that these folks had chosen. They could not tell people what to eat for, those 40, 60 years, right? So what they're going to do is look at their diet and their dietary food frequency questionnaire and then put it into different categories. So this is how it came out. It's kind of interesting. There's an alternate Mediterranean diet. I know you'll ask, how do you get a Mediterranean diet in Singapore, right? So Asian eating is often quite a bit different. So this is modified to the Asian kind of perspective. There's the DASH diet, Dietary Approaches to Stop Hypertension, the Alternate Healthy Eating Index, the Plant-Based Diet Index, and then the Healthy Plant-Based Diet Index. So there they kind of are, and as things came out the other end, which of these patterns actually did best, it looks like this. This is very similar to the hazard ratio. Notice that the alternate Mediterranean diet was pretty good. It's about that 33% reduction in dementia, comparing those with the highest to the lowest quartile. So they look for the pattern in everybody's eating, assign them. So this is kind of how it comes out. So that's encouraging to us. We know that eating lots of veggies, tomatoes, the type of things that are eaten around the Mediterranean, making sure you have, I guess, a little bit of fish for the omega-3, because I know that's included as well, seem to do quite well for these folks in Singapore. Then we can go from there to China, where they've done that kind of study too. So this is a population-based cohort study. So they're just looking across the population and giving us feedback as far as diet is concerned. 29,000 people ages 60 and older, followed from 2009 to 2019, so about 10 years. Physical exercise was one of the things they were encouraged to do, and then eating the appropriate amount of at least 12 different items: fruits, vegetables, fish, meat, dairy products, salt, oil, eggs, cereal, legumes, nuts, and tea. These are the things they've measured, okay? So how did it come out? So people who never drank alcohol did better than those who drank alcohol. If you'd never smoked, they did better. Cognitive activity, if they exercise their brain at least twice a week by reading or playing cards or mahjong, which is a game the Chinese play, those types of things tend to improve the brain function to keep it from declining so quickly. Social contact, engaging with others at least twice a week, that is attending a community meeting or visiting friends and relatives. Interestingly, in Singapore, there is a cash bonus that goes to someone who moves within so many blocks of their older relative. They want family nearby, so you've got somebody to contact, and people do better when that happens. Now, this last one, it says this worked with or without ApoE4. ApoE4 is a genetic abnormality that increases your risk for heart disease and dementia. And before this study and others similar to it, we hadn't known that lifestyle could make a difference in people who have the genetic bent towards dementia. So it's very encouraging to us to know that that's the case. I mentioned to you that my father got dementia before he died, that and a little bit of Parkinson's. And I assume, I don't know that he had his genes checked, but I assume he had it because I have it. Okay? And my chances with having one allele, one ApoE4, is about 33%, about a third by 80 years of age that I'll have some dementia. Now, I think there's a couple ways of looking at that. And the other one is I have a 66% chance of not having it. So you see why I'm interested in this whole topic. I, at present, am 71 years of age, going on 72 in a couple of weeks, right? I'm still young. Amen. Yes, thank you. Important thing to recognize. I used to think it was old, but... So to try to do the right things to keep that brain functioning is something that's important to me. So I'm glad to be able to share it to you as well. If you have the ApoE4 both genes, it's a lot closer to 50%, okay? So it's a lot higher. So I'm thankful for that little bit of an advantage. Any questions so far? I think we haven't finished diet completely, but we've hit quite a bit of it. Yes? How to check for that? Your doctor can actually do it. It's something that I could order on the medical records. I personally did it by going on 23andMe and paying the $100 getting my genes done, right? And so then they'll tell you what genes you have, and I can go from there. I can make decisions to help change the course of life. Okay, good question. Yes, ma'am. Are you talking about the Singapore study? We wish that it had. We'd like to focus in that direction. But I think what we'll do is find out as we go on that there may be some nutrients that become a little bit low as we're on 100% plant-based. I will show you some randomized controlled trials. For example, I mentioned earlier zinc. I think that's a real important one. People who are vegetarians tend to go a little bit low. I learned when I took a class in geriatric nutrition way back in my MPH days, we had this class we had to go through, that people tend to get low in zinc when they get older. And I had no idea when old started, so I started taking zinc at age 50. Okay? So it's one of those things that tends to go low. It's really important for the immune system, and it's very important for the brain. And I'll show you a study where zinc can make a difference even in people whose dementia is slipping with a randomized controlled trial. So that'll be coming. So I think it's probably some nutrients that we're missing or tend to miss when we're 100% plant-based. Even the Adventist Health Study shows, for example, increase in some cancers in those who are vegans over those who are vegetarians. So we would have expected it to be the other way if we were pure 100% plant-based. Does that make sense? So we're looking for truth. Science is trying to help us with that.
This deals with the genetics of mother and father and the effect upon the children. Does it make any difference? You talk about your father had a certain gene. I didn't know if the male tends to pass stronger than the female.
So the question has to do with this gene, this ApoE4 gene. Is it more likely to come for the male or the female? Well, it's not on the X or Y. It's not on the Y chromosome or the X chromosome. So it's not really a sex thing. It's one of the others, and both parents would have to hand it to you for you to have the ApoE4 homozygous. So they're the same. Both genes are the same. Otherwise, as for myself, I'm guessing my father gave it to me, but it may have been my mother. Okay, so good question. Okay, let's look a little bit further. So this is asking about long-term energy intake and fat intake. So this is a subjective cognitive decline. That is, if I ask you, is your memory declining, right? So how bad has it come down? So it's subjective. It's coming from either the person or the family member saying there's been cognitive decline. We're not using a standardized test to see if there's memory decline. So it's done on the Nurses' Health Study and the Health Professionals Follow-Up Study. So Nurses' Health Study, women. The Health Professionals Follow-Up Study is men. So they put these together. They were followed over really a number of years, 20 years, and they had these food frequency questionnaires that they were asked on a regular basis. Dr. Walter Willett from Boston area kind of wrote the textbook on this, and we've learned a lot about nutrition by able to look forward, asking diet questions through time, and then you see in the large group of people what diseases showed up. And then you can say, okay, which dietary things fit with it best. So that's this kind of study. And they compared the highest quintiles and the lowest quintiles. That is, divide the whole group into those that had a lot and those that had less energy, and then compare them. And it ends up that fat calories were more powerful than carbohydrate calories. Both of them, if you have caloric excess, it increases inflammation in your body, and it can kind of slow the brain down and lead to more brain death. So you don't want excessive calories. You'd like to have it lower calories. So we know that from this study, and we know that fat calories are worse than carbohydrate calories. So if you're going to overeat calories, probably better go with potato, baked potato rather than French fries. Okay, so I'll give you a perspective. So too many calories tends to increase dementia. Questions about that one? No? Okay. This was fascinating to me. Effect of a 12-month intervention with whey protein powder on cognitive function in older adults with mild cognitive impairment. So mild cognitive impairment, it's not full dementia, it's just starting in that direction. Now what happens over the next year if we actually give a supplement? So it ends up that whey protein is one of the proteins in milk. It seems to be the healthier one. The other one is casein. That one, I just try to avoid that because I know that in lab rats it turns on cancer genes. You can take it away, turn the cancer gene off. Put in the casein and the cancer gene turns on. So for me that was a good reason to kind of leave the casein alone. So they looked at this whey protein powder. It looked like it had some taurine with it and some B vitamins. And it worked in mice, so they tried it in human beings. And you can see there were 53 who were in the intervention group, and then there were 54 controls. They got 15 grams per day of the whey powder, and they used a MOCA test. MOCA test is a test of mental function that's standard in doctors' offices. And you can see there was actually statistically significant change in the and a protection, if you will, in those that got the whey powder. So this is a mild, making a mild difference, but it does seem to make a difference. Here's another interesting one. Sugary drinks. Now, interestingly, from a scientific standpoint, when we start to look at the problem with sugary drinks, we find out that that also includes fruit juice. You know, I grew up thinking orange juice is great, right? It's healthy. We heard it all the time, and our moms made sure we always got it. But it ends up that fruit juices, whether it's apple juice or orange juice or whatever it may be, is also a sugary drink and shows up the same way that sodas do as far as statistical analysis is concerned. So this is looking at dementia. It's a cross-sectional, so it's an association. And they did neuropsychological testing and an MRI on Framingham study. You all remember the Framingham study? It was started in the 1950s. It was first thing they found was that cholesterol increases your risk of heart attack, right? So we learned we needed to decrease our cholesterol and then our saturated fat on this group. But this group has continued to be studied now, several generations now past. So they're still being watched. So looking at these folks and the likelihood of their having some dementia, it's kind of interesting. For example, A up there on the top left, you can see there's total sugar beverage intake. And those that had less than 1 a day did a whole lot better than those that had greater than 2 a day on those sugary drinks. That includes sodas, but it also includes fruit juices. And then total sugary beverage intake on the right there with the B, and you can see, again, greater than 2 per day, it really is not the best way to go. Fewer didn't seem to be such a problem there. And then this total sugary beverage intake, and the one on the bottom is the logical memory. So it was the result of this test and the number correct. And you can see immediate recall is the black, and the delayed recall is the gray. So you see, the more drinks we had a day of the sugary, the more likely there was to be dementia. Now, this doesn't prove that sugary drinks cause dementia, but it certainly looks suspicious. It's not a drug that's going to harm you. From looking at myself, it's probably a good idea if I keep those sugary drinks on the low side. Does that make sense? So even though the level of evidence doesn't get up real high on this one, it still makes sense to move in that direction. Not that I would never have any orange juice, so it's letting us know that that's a direction that may be worth going. And I suspect with time that will continue to show validity, although we don't know it yet. Questions so far? Okay, salt. We've all heard that too much salt is a bit of a problem, right? So this is a prospective cohort, and it's done the China Health and Nutrition Survey. So 4,213 people over 50 years of age at baseline, and they looked at their salt intake over time and then checked their mental capacity. Interestingly, a high sodium decreased mental function. Increased potassium improved or protected mental function. So where do you get potassium? I know people like to say bananas. It's supposed to be the perfect food. What's that? Figs. Well, the truth is potassium comes from fruits and vegetables. So when somebody says they're increasing their potassium, when a study says that, I know what they're doing. They're increasing fruits and vegetables. And the food that has even more potassium, believe it or not, is beans. Beans have about 3 times the amount of potassium as bananas do, which is kind of interesting. So high potassium intake, it seems to be protective. Was it the fruit and vegetables or was it the potassium? I don't know, okay? But it makes sense to move in that direction. Notice the sodium-potassium ratio was more important than either of the others. So it's that ratio between the two, meaning the salt is coming down and the potassium is going up. So cardiovascular and cerebrovascular disease seem to be the mediator there. Replacing 1 gram of sodium, 1,000 milligrams, about 1 teaspoon, with potassium, increased the cognitive score by 1 point. So that's the effect size they found of that. So move in the right direction. Don't let your salt get too high. Keep it on the lower side, and certainly use lots of potassium. Here's the one I promised you. No, this is not the one. This is another one. Magnesium threonic acid. Question. It doesn't, he's asking, does Celtic salt, does it make any difference what kind of salt it is? The salt we generally use is sodium chloride, and it really doesn't matter where it comes from. The sodium content is going to be about the same. So a teaspoon is about 2 grams of sodium. Not 2 grams of salt. Sodium is 40% of salt, as we generally think about it. But if you've been to the grocery store and seen low salt or no salt on the shelf, so those are potassium chloride. So you could actually use potassium and shake it on. It's a little bitter if you put it on your tongue, but it is possible. And salt, from a chemistry standpoint, is a negative and positive that are put together that are going to come apart in a solution, right? So there's all kinds of salts that don't have sodium in them, but they're kinds we use in chemical reactions rather than on the table, okay? So yes, sodium is, it doesn't matter which of the salts you use, except for the no salt and low salt, potassium chloride. All the rest of them have about the same amount of sodium. Okay? Okay, here's magnesium threonic acid. Now, magnesium is another one of those foods that we tend to get a little bit low in our diet. Estimates from the federal government are 80% of people over age 65 are not getting the recommended daily allowance. So that's probably a lot of us. Where does magnesium come from in our diets? Well, my usual response to that is beans and greens, because beans and greens tend to be high in magnesium. Remember high school biology, you learned about chlorophyll. So what's the middle of the chlorophyll molecule? It's that magnesium. So it tends to be in the plants. This is using magnesium threonic acid. Why threonic acid? Because magnesium threonic acid will go into the brain without kind of going to, it goes past the blood-brain barrier quickly and easily. So they did this as a randomized controlled trial for 12 weeks. There's a placebo group. People were randomly assigned to either placebo or the supplement. The salt they used has a brand. It's called Claramem. It's Claramem, as in clear memory, Claramem. So this is kind of a supplement company that has paid for this study. They used 4 measures of cognitive function, and those are listed there. I have never used them. They're just what the scientists use. And then a composite score, which takes all of them together to see how these folks did. This is fascinating. Within 12 weeks, there was a significant improvement in cognitive function taking this magnesium threonic acid. So there's a randomized controlled trial saying magnesium supplementation may actually make a difference. This is one of those things I can say, if your memory is slipping or you're worried about it, this is something we could say there's enough evidence for you to do that. Now, it may hit your pocketbook a little bit, and I can't guarantee that it's going to do something for you, but in this group of people with the placebo controls, so nobody could really cheat on it or think that it helps to balance out the placebo effect. But there was significant improvement with that magnesium supplement. Is that encouraging? A lot of us don't get enough magnesium. Worthwhile eating plenty of it, and it might be helpful for you to try the supplement. There's a vitamin E supplement. This is a randomized controlled trial, and this was done in the VA kind of system. They looked at both the medication, memantine for dementia, and they did it kind of with and without. There were several different arms, the vitamin E, and it ended up that the vitamin E alone was what slowed the cognitive decline and decreased the caregiver burden. So in this trial, it looks like vitamin E was of some benefit. Are there questions? Yes, sir. So this is the slide. Yeah. So it's magnesium threonic acid, crosses the blood-brain barrier more quickly. So now magnesium will cross the blood-brain barrier, dietary magnesium. This one was tested because it goes across easier. And you're looking at only 12 weeks. We would all do better, or most of us would do better, unless we have really bad kidney failure, to take more magnesium. You get too much magnesium and you get diarrhea, right? So you don't want that much. But you'd like to have as much as your gut will handle, as long as you have kidneys that function, to try to increase the magnesium in your body, and that's very likely to help your brain as well. Good question. Yes? She says, would you recommend a combination supplement? Myself, I've also decided to take magnesium to make sure I've got a little bit extra. For those of us who are a little older, sometimes the bowels get a little bit stiff, so the magnesium helps that too, right? You can take a mixture. I personally don't think, although I don't have proof on this, I don't have the randomized controlled trial, that just increasing the magnesium in your diet, your brain will pick it up. It's just not as effectively, and these folks were trying to sell a supplement. Yeah. So I think then you're asking, do we take magnesium with multiple kinds or with one? It ends up that the magnesium absorption, the faster it's absorbed, the more likely it is to cause diarrhea. So I generally will give a magnesium that is not absorbed so quickly. Magnesium glycinate, for example, is a good one and tends to help people go to sleep. So they can take that at night if they're having a hard time sleeping. It doesn't have to be multiple types, although it's okay to take multiple types. Good. Yes, sir. You know, they didn't tell me what it is. And I said this is a supplement company. So they're trying to find out, does this particular salt of magnesium actually help? So they demonstrated that for us, that it does. We have to kind of guesstimate what dose is, because they don't tell me here. And we have to guesstimate that other magnesiums do the same thing. And from what I know physiologically about magnesium, it shouldn't really matter. Your gut will tell you when you're getting too much, right? So you can slowly increase it, and your body will generally handle it. Yes, there was a hand over here somewhere. I see someone pointing. It got answered? Okay, good. Glycinate, magnesium glycinate. Magnesium oxide is the slowest absorbed, and that one is easier to adjust the dose because you're less likely to have diarrhea on it. So, vitamin E, we just talked about. Let's move on a little bit further. Copper and zinc. This is kind of a review article, and I've summarized it here. Excess copper causes neuronal toxicity. Copper and zinc tend to do this. One goes up, the other one goes down. Zinc deficiency causes neuronal damage. And then zinc supplementation versus placebo in a randomized controlled trial was beneficial on cognitive measures. Now, this study was done in 2012, so we're really looking out pretty close to 15 years ago, aren't we? So it's not new. Here's one in 2022. It's a review article, again, kind of looking things over. Zinc in the brain is really important. It's 10 times higher in the brain than it is in our serum. Measuring the serum does not give a really good measure of what's happening in the rest of the body when it comes to zinc. It tends to decrease with age. Another one of those things that just because I'm getting older, I should probably be taking this. Intracellular zinc is regulated. It comes in a whole bunch of different kind of forms. Zinc iron transporter-like and transporters, etc. And then too much zinc can increase plaque in the brain and can cause, I guess with glutamate, you can actually get increased synaptic zinc. A deficit causes plaque, and replacement increases neurogenesis, or new brain cells. So, you'd asked earlier about the zinc and how much do I take. The recommendation, I would say, is 40 milligrams per day would be the upper end of normal. You probably don't need that much, but from the Institute of Medicine, that's the upper end of considered safe daily dosing. If you're a bit deficient, if you haven't been taking it, if your memory is slipping, I would just start 40 milligrams a day and see if you can, if it will help you. So zinc deficit increases immune aging and increases inflammation. So make sure you get enough zinc. Questions about zinc? Yes, ma'am. So it is true that some supplements will help when you have an illness of some kind. And this thought that taking zinc if you have a cold, I know we had zinc lozenges for a while, and some of the studies, they're kind of ambivalent as whether that actually works. How much that is placebo effect, I don't know, okay? If you think it's going to help you, it may very well do so, just because the mind is very powerful, that connection between, we call it psychoneuroimmunology. The whole immune system will respond to what you believe. So I don't know that I can give you a good answer on that. I can tell you that it is reasonable to take long-term as we get older. And it's one of those that I have personally decided to take. I am not a randomized control trial, obviously, but I think there's enough evidence that that's the case. Good. This is brand new. 2025. It was brand new when I discovered it here late last year. This is an animal study. This is not to the place of humans, right? Lithium is something that has not even been understood as a nutrient. There's no recommended daily allowance. There's no toxic levels. They haven't really worked with that. Now, I've used lithium in my practice for people with manic depressive disorder, and we would use it as doses of about 300 three times a day, and it worked very nicely. In the old days before all these, quotes, modern new psychiatric medications, I feel it's safer than the modern ones to take the old lithium. And it kind of interferes a little bit with the sodium pump and just slows things down a little bit, which is what people with manic depression need. Well, it ends up that lithium, apparently, when they checked it in mice, is absolutely necessary for brain. If they take lithium out, they get dementia-type changes in their brains. And of course, in mice, you can open up the brain and see what's there, right? So you can actually measure the plaques. They can measure their abilities with the mazes and those types of things. And they found that taking the lithium away caused a dementia. Replacing it actually helped to decrease the plaques and improve the brain function. So I don't know. The recommendation is relatively low. The lithium orotate is available over the counter. The psychiatrists tell us that anybody who has a problem with impulsive behavior, they can't help themselves, they're kind of jumping into it, a very low dose of lithium orotate is often prescribed. That goes certainly for teenagers and kids and for adults as well. It will decrease impulsivity given at low doses. Talking about 4 to maybe 10 milligrams a day will just kind of slow that impulsivity down. So I know it's safe at that level, and it's those levels that were actually given to the rats. So it's a very safe level for us, and so lithium may actually be beneficial. Again, we don't have human studies on this. This is just animals. But because I know that 4 to 10 milligrams a day is perfectly safe, I have started to take it, okay? That's, of course, up to you, although please recognize we don't have the science to support that, okay? Any questions about lithium? Kind of a weird one. Something new for me, okay? This is the the mouse studies. It was reported in Nature, so that's a well-regarded journal. Finger study. So this is the Finnish geriatric intervention study to prevent cognitive impairment and disability. So Finnish decided to get involved with that, 2009 to 2011. They screened 2,654 individuals aged 60 to 77. 1,260 were randomly assigned to either an intervention or a control. There was 93% participation at the end of 12 months and 88% at 24 months, so there was good participation in the study. Kind of hard when you're dealing outside a controlled scientific environment. These people are, of course, at home. So the control group, the nurse gave advice to everybody, really, on healthy diet, physical activity, cognition, and social activities being beneficial for the management of vascular risk factors and disability prevention. They had blood tests done 6, 12, and 24 months, and the results were mailed to the participants with general information regarding the significance and advice to contact a personal physician if needed. The intervention that was given to the the participant group was exercise, diet, cognitive training, vascular risk monitoring. So they were looking for atherosclerosis, cholesterol levels, etc. The diet they were encouraged to, each one had a nutritionist, and they got 7 to 9, or 3 individual groups and then 7 to 9 group sessions. Proteins about 10 to 20%, fat intake 20 to 35%, keeping the saturated fats low, trans fats really low, and then about 10 to 20% of the monounsaturated and 5 to 10% of the polyunsaturated fats, including a daily omega-3 fatty acid supplement. I think that's correct for supplement. Not 100% sure. It may have been from the diet. 40 to 55% carbohydrate, less than 10% from refined sugar. Increase the dietary fiber, 25 to 35. Keep salt less than 5 grams a day. Less than 5% of the energy from alcohol. Alcohol turns into fat within the body, so we try to keep that to a minimum. And decreasing the energy intake by 5 to 10%, just to help to keep it down, especially in those who had BMIs that were higher. So this is, of course, a randomized controlled trial done in the community. Can it be done? And the answer is yes. So dietary goals were achieved by recommendation of high consumption of fruit and vegetables, consumption of whole cereal products and low-fat milk and meat products, limiting of sucrose, table sugar, to less than 50 grams per day, use of vegetable margarine, rapeseed oil instead of butter, and fish consumption at least 2 portions per week. And then this neuropsychological test battery was done. And what you see there on the top is the, let me see if I can get this right. This is the control is the blue line, and the red is the intervention. So you see an improvement in the scores of those on the neuropsychological testing. Look at executive functioning, those types of things, you can see the same improvement. You see down here processing speed, how fast people can process the information coming to them, also showed significant improvement. And memory, it didn't change as much, but there is still an improvement. So that's encouraging to us. We can make lifestyle change, and we can help to preserve our memory, our mental function. Questions? Do you need to take fish or omega-3 supplement? I don't think you need to. It's a little too complicated for our discussion here. If people have been on a high animal product, a lot of meat, especially cow and pig and that type of stuff, it's probably reasonable to take an omega-3 supplement. People who are doing a transition to plant-based, it's reasonable for them to take an omega-3 on that change. It takes probably a year or 2 to actually change over the fats throughout the body. So it could be reasonable to do that. The truth is omega-3 is present in an awful lot of plant foods. Okay, a lot of people are completely unaware of that. We have all the enzymes we need to take those plant fats and turn them into fish oil. Just like the fish are taking plant fats, they don't make those. They get them from plants, and then they change them into fish oil. We have all the same enzymes. We can do that ourselves. So no, you don't have to, but yes, I would recommend it for some people, especially if they had real poor diets in the past. So that was omega-3s. We're going to change gears now, and I'm going to show you something that is a little different. I ran across this several years ago and was pleasantly surprised. I ran into it because a patient of mine came in. I said, "What can I do to help you today?" He said, "I don't need anything. I'm doing fine. I want you to read this book here, and I want to do this." And what he handed me was Dale Bredesen's book on reversing dementia. I was taught it was not possible. And of course, my patient, I learned long ago to keep your ears open. You got to keep learning. So I read the book, and as I read through it, it kind of made sense to me. So I have followed Dr. Bredesen, who is a neuroscientist at University of California, Los Angeles, who's published a lot. and has been doing primary research on the things that tend to make dementia happen. So I'm going to share a little bit with you, maybe too much, but I'll share with you, and it'll help you understand at least a bit of what's going on and help make sense of what we've been talking about. We're calling this metabolic profiling, okay? Dr. Bredesen points out that dementia is not monolithic. There are many different dimensions to it. There are many different causes, and that's what his research was, trying to find the multiple things that might be causing it. So if you go and, well, he describes it as a leaky roof. If you've got a leaky roof, if you plug one hole, do you still have a leaky roof? Yes. You really have to plug all the holes. So in essence, what he said, all of these things can cause dementia and tend to make it more of it happen, right? Make it more likely. So what we need to do is stop those things, and then these things are protected. We need to do these things. So you put all of those together, and it's been a rather interesting experience. I've had some patients do it, and it's really exciting to see people actually getting better. So notice that he's divided it here, and there's actually several iterations of this. There's Alzheimer's that's a little more inflammatory. There's Alzheimer's that's non-inflammatory. And then there's this cortical, that is, it affects usually younger individuals. They don't have so much of the loss of memory, the amnesic features. It typically affects those with ApoE4 negative individuals, and then zinc deficiency tends to fall in this area, which is very interesting. So kind of different categories. So my patient wanted me to do the testing on him and then try to find out what we could actually change. So I read the book, and it kind of led me in an interesting direction. So this was published, it says here, when was it? It's been 7 years ago, 8 years ago, I don't remember exactly when. Does it say down there? "2018, there we go. So not that long ago. And what he did was he published case studies. When we talk about science, we often start with a case study. You know, you have a patient that it worked on, okay, will it work on more than one? So we say, hey, it worked on these patients, so this is the start of the scientific process. Now we look at epidemiology, and we finally reach the point where we do a randomized control trial. So he's starting at the beginning here, and he reports on 100 patients that actually had reversal of their dementia. Now, we've been told that it's not reversible, but the truth is if you can reverse one, we can't say it's not reversible, right? So if it can reverse, then maybe we need to learn a little more about it. Now, I'll show you at least some of these here. Not sure how those are up on the screen for you, whether you can see them. So this is number 83 in the list. You can see a 78-year-old female, the ApoE4. She has ApoE3 and an ApoE4, so she has one of those ApoE4s. She has trouble with memory and executive function and this thing called praxis. Diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. She had an MRI that showed her hippocampal volume, that part where the memory is in our brain, was at the less than 1 percentile. So it was quite shrunk. Her MOCA, testing her mental function, what the doctor does to say how bad the dementia is, as she went through identifying all of these potential holes and getting them fixed, her MOCA went from 0 up to 3, so it showed improvement. That's encouraging. During that time, there was a striking change. She began speaking again, dressing herself, dancing, riding a bike, emailing, kayaking. They all returned for her. So that's pretty impressive, isn't it? Woo! Here's another one, an 74-year-old. Again, just one of those E4 alleles. Memory problems mostly, diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. They used a PET scan to look at the brain. They found that the measurement here went from 3 percentile up to 84th percentile. Significant improvement. Improvement sustained at 4.5 years, follow up to the initial report. That's good. It can barely last over time. Number 85 here, 69-year-old with, again, one of the ApoE4s, executive function, decision-making, those types of things, diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. MRI showed cerebral atrophy. The MOCA, when she had those, female. When she had those those holes fixed, went from 18 to 27, and 30 is kind of top of the line. So there was significant improvement there. Driver's license returned, follows recipes again. When the nurse came back to visit, what happened? I mean, this woman is better, right? So it's encouraging to know that this may be helpful. We still have a lot to learn. Here's number 96. This is a 67-year-old female who has a double ApoE4. And trouble with memory, executive calculation, and behavioral problems. Did not do too well on her mental testing. The SAGE was 0 here. Return of addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, and holding conversations again. So that's encouraging, isn't it? Now some people, some doctors, many doctors will say, you are giving people false hope if you talk about reversing dementia. It's actually, I think that's a little unfair, because those who are saying there is nothing that can be done, it's going to happen and nothing, are giving people false hopelessness, right? Because we can't say for sure that you're going to get better or your loved one's going to get better, but we can say it can happen and there is hope. Now, getting this stuff done, since the medical community and insurance doesn't always pay for all of it, certainly supplements and those types of things, there may be some expense to it, so it may cost you something, but that's a risk that I think an individual needs to make, and people need to know really and make their own decisions. Does that make sense to you? Okay, now let's get into the details. This is from Dr. Bredesen's book. What we have here in the middle is the amyloid precursor protein. This is the one that in the brain turns into those plaques and causes the problem inside the brain. This protein, the one in the middle, is the one that's the amyloid precursor protein. It sits across the membrane, and it can be changed either by being cut once, there on the left, or being cut 3 times on the right. Interestingly, if it's cut 3 times, you can see the A and then the beta. That's the amyloid beta protein. So when it's cut 3 times, you get much more of this amyloid beta protein. If it's cut once, it ends up being protective against dementia. So that's kind of the biochemistry, if you will, or the physiology of what's happening in the brain. So what Dr. Bredesen did was he said, what are the things that actually make it go to the right, toward amyloid beta? What are the things that make it go to the left, toward safety? And we stop these on the right, and we increase those on the left. Does that make sense? It's pretty basic once you understand what's going on. So this amyloid beta tends to accumulate near the synapses, and as it does that, it tends to kind of block things up. Now this is interesting. You remember the prion disease that we talked about several years ago, the mad cow disease, where the different proteins, it wasn't something you really caught, but the proteins would start to hold on to each other, and they would form a mat that would kind of destroy the brain. There was kind of a very rapid dementia that happened from this mad cow syndrome. It ends up that this amyloid beta is prionic. It does the same thing. So if you get too much of it, it actually has a function in protecting the brain. When there's small amounts of it, there's a little problem. There might be an infection or inflammation of some kind, and it'll wall it off. But when you reach the point where it kind of goes over the edge, it kind of takes over the whole brain, and the brain quits. That make sense? I mean, it's falling apart. It's where dementia kind of comes from. So what can actually make the difference? This amyloid precursor protein has several master dependency receptors. There's estrogen, for example, and testosterone, and thyroid. These are all hormones. And if we get low in those, if they get out of balance, it can increase the likelihood of making more amyloid beta protein. NF-kappa beta is another one of the body's signalers that may actually push it in the wrong way. It tends to be inflammatory. Sirtuin is is made from resveratrol. You remember this? It comes from grapes, right? So that's protective, and this sertraline SIR-T1 is beneficial. Vitamin D is also helpful, okay? Having a low vitamin D can tend to make dementia worse. Each one with its own receptor, and when there's inadequate amounts, or in some cases too much, it can cause trouble. So, wait a minute, was I talking in the wrong place? I may have been. There they are, estrogen, testosterone, thyroid, NF-kappa beta, and then they're listed for you. ApoE4 is one of those things that is of concern, as we've spoken of already, and it tends to make it more likely to go towards the amyloid beta. So, and there the risk, homozygous, both of them about 50%, heterozygous is about 30% by age 80. So that's kind of how the science of it works inside our brain, and that's how we're coming to it. So this is the holes and roof. It's following, what I'm going to show you next is a whole bunch of studies. Remember I told you the patient came in and said, I want to do this? So I read the book, I said, okay, and I ordered those tests for him. And then I made it into an order set within my medical record, so when the patient said, I think my memory's slipping, I could say, okay, there's some impaired memory, and then I could order it. And I found that Medicare would usually pay for it, so that was encouraging to me. So these next, we're not going to try to read them all, certainly all the details. I have kind of in here some of the recommendations, but it's, again, too much for this group. I shared this with the doctors and encourage them to copy it and use it. So you have the genetics, which you can do nothing about. You have the inflammation, which you can do quite a bit about. Infections such as HSV, Borrelia, fungi. You may have heard that if you have, for example, gingivitis in your mouth, there's some bacteria in there that can increase your risk of dementia. So those bacteria can go into your brain as well. Homocysteine tends to be elevated in people when that's high, it increases inflammation. Fasting insulin, when it's high, tends to cause trouble. If it's low, it's also a problem. We like to keep the sugar in the right place. Hormone status, vitamin D, thyroid, estrogen, progesterone, the estradiol progesterone ratio, testosterone, free testosterone, cortisol. So these are all things to kind of check to see if the systems are working like they're supposed to, looking for holes in the roof. There's the zinc and copper. I said they tend to come together, so checking both of those. Magnesium, there it is. Selenium is another helpful one. It helps to make glutathione, which is an antioxidant. Look for toxins, things like mercury. People who eat a lot of fish tend to have a lot of mercury, and dental amalgams may be causing trouble as well. Lead, arsenic. I know I had a patient with arsenic in their well water who had some arsenic toxicity. Cadmium is another one that can come from paints and whatnot. Sleep, so how is the sleep going? Lipids, the cholesterol, vitamin E, thiamine, leaky gut. Here's a test that helps to test for that. Gluten sensitivity. And then autoantibodies, cholesterol medicine, especially the ones that are fat soluble, simvastatin, does increase amyloid protein. Not the others, but simvastatin does. And then on the patients, I've been measuring hippocampal volume so I can see if it actually increases over a year. And then you target the treatment. So, does this really work? Because all we have now is Dr. Bredesen's primary research, and we have a case series. Well, it was put to the test, and here, 2022, this was reported. This is a clinical pilot. 25 patients with dementia or mild cognitive impairment, age 50 to 76. They had to have a MoCA over 19. They didn't want severe dementia. They wanted mild. And indeed, they were able to demonstrate that there is a tendency towards improvement as they went through the program. And if I remember correctly, it was 9 months on this particular study. So trying to fix all of those things. So As I was preparing for this talk, I said, well, I wonder if there is a randomized controlled trial yet, because I hadn't seen it. And what do you know? There is a randomized controlled trial. It was reported at the Dementia conference in UK just last month. It's not in publication yet, but it does seem to be showing some improvement. And I asked, you all know Claude. Has anybody met Claude yet? So the AI, I said, make me a slide. So Claude did that for me this morning. So where are we? The system is incredibly complex. Drugs are not working. They slow, but the truth is they have so many side effects and the benefit is so small. When do we start moving? There's some things that we can do now and some things maybe we should wait on. For example, supplements are relatively inexpensive, and at reasonable doses they may very well help, especially those that are more common when there's a deficiency. So yes, I think that we can probably, in my own mind, begin even while we're waiting for more of the randomized controlled trials. We have epidemiologic evidence about a lot of lifestyle things. We have a few randomized controlled trials, but that number is growing. And here's that concept: is it false hope or is it false hopelessness? So I have been happy, and before I retired, of helping people kind of ask those questions and then make those changes. And I'll show you, if we have time here, at least one patient that has done that. Any questions or comments? Yes. I have not had nearly as many as he had. There are some types of dementia, like Lewy body dementia, that does not respond very well. It's got something else going on that doesn't respond in the same way. So I have seen mild to moderate improvement in several patients. But, my number is certainly something less than 10, right? But we give people hope and we let them try to move in that direction. And it's nice when that improvement happens. Good question. Okay, the last little bit I'm going to do really fast. But it's taking basic science and it's showing you some rather fascinating things. Okay, so a summary here. Follow me. We know that saturated fat, this is from the Women's Health Study, looking at females. And if you look at their fats, we know that saturated fat tends to worsen dementia. So that association has been found, and this is kind of looking out over quite some time. Where is that coming from? Where is that saturated fat? What's the biochemistry of that? So there are bacteria in our body. We mentioned the ones in the gum, but they come from our gut as well. And when bacteria break down in the gut, they release these things called endotoxins, exotoxins, lipooxygenase, and I forgot the correct name on that. It's lipo-oligosaccharides. That's the LOS. And they're secreted. There's amyloids actually released by the bacteria. And there's small non-coding RNAs. And these go into the bloodstream. Interesting. Not something I had hoped was going in. I thought, of course, nutrition was going in, but not those things that might cause trouble. So this now finds that in people with dementia, you're more likely to have those things like those lipopolysaccharides, the E. coli, K99, pili protein. These are coming from our gut through our blood and ending up in our brain, and people with dementia have more of those things in there. That's kind of scary, isn't it? It tends to locate with amyloid in the same area. So now we have a look at this, which is all looking at these same sorts of things. The index is the inflammation. When someone is taking different foods, okay, so they use water, they use cream, they use glucose, and they used orange juice. And they wanted to see what happened after the meal when you got this lipopolysaccharide expression response. seems to come from the fats. So here they prove it by showing that it's really the cream that's doing it. The water didn't do it. The glucose didn't do it. The orange juice didn't do it. The water didn't do it. But the cream did. So we assume it's the fat, and the cream tends to have a lot of saturated fat in it. So this is a randomized controlled trial. It's double-blinded. They used saturated fat, and they used monounsaturated fat. And they gave a meal, and they wanted to see how much of this endotoxemia, these things from the gut, ended up in the bloodstream. Interesting. Well, it ends up that the saturated fat, a lot more of it ends up there than the monounsaturated. So there's a difference between the monounsaturated and saturated fats. So high-fat diet tends to increase, for some reason, the amount of these inflammatory bacterial products going through our gut and ending up in our brain. Fascinating. Now, this was the exciting part to me. This asks the same question: what happens if we have that fat, that saturated fat with fiber? And it ends up that saturated fat with fiber blocks all of that. When you add the fiber, it's a high-fiber diet with a saturated fat. It keeps that endotoxemia, those bacterial pieces, from going into the blood, into the brain. We assume into the brain. They were checking blood levels. That's fascinating, isn't it? A plant-based diet that's high in fiber is protective against dementia. Cool. I like that. Now, that was an awful lot all at once, and some of you may have picked it up. Does anybody have any questions about it before I give the last case study? Yes? So I think you've got it correct. If you have a high-fiber meal and you have saturated fat from, for example, coconut milk, that high fiber blocks the kind of bad things going from your gut into your bloodstream, which are likely to end up in your brain, and apparently do that from previous studies. Good. Thank you for clarifying that. Okay, here's one of my patients for you, okay? 82-year-old, Pleasant. I first saw her on February 21, 2022. She was on several medications, blood pressure, some omega-3, vitamin C, and vitamin D. Lived with her husband, who had had a hip replacement, wasn't getting around very well. She was brought in by a neighbor, also patients of mine, who said, you know, she's having a hard time, she's getting worse, can you help? So, very nice people, very generous. They'd been neighbors for 40 years, and they were just helping the folks as they got older. So we did some blood tests on her. We found her hemoglobin a little bit low. Her blood sugar was good. Her homocysteine was up. That increased inflammation. Her magnesium was low. Her zinc was low. She was postmenopausal. She'd had a hysterectomy. That meant it was safe for me to give her a little estrogen. We checked her level to make sure it was actually on the low side, and it was. And then she ended up contacting Recode. Recode, at least for a while, was the company that assembled around Dr. Bredesen's research. So people can actually contact them, pay them. They will send you the stuff necessary to get your blood drawn. So you go to the lab, you have it done. They'll make the supplements for you that you need based on your blood, and then you can take it. So she had decided to do that, and so she ordered that up and began to take it. Notice at the bottom, this is an illustrative case and does not establish causality or generalizability, right? It's an individual sort of a thing, so that's clear. Follow-up was on January 26, 23, 9 months later. Of course, I had seen her in between, but this is the last one. She was taking her B12, vitamin D, zinc, estradiol, magnesium. Her weight had improved. She'd gone up. She was, very low on the BMI. BMI had improved. Better kitchen skills. She was better able. And what really struck the neighbor was what happened when they went to the thrift store. When she would take her to the thrift store, she would just sit and stare because it was too much input. At the end of it, when she came in. She was involved in the shopping. She was going around and looking with the neighbor. So there was significant improvement in her function by addressing it this way. So there you go. You made it all the way through. And I only saw one person go to sleep. Thank you. Nobody snored. It's okay. So this is kind of the summary slide that I started with, right? So these are the things that may make sense for you if you're considering doing this yourself. Of course, I would recommend that you go ahead and get Dr. Bredesen's book. And there's a book that kind of lays out the whole story. There is stories of people for those first 100 in their own words. They told their story of what it felt like to have their brain go away and come back. That's a fascinating read as well. I haven't had a chance to really go over it with my wife yet, but there's some cookbooks and whatnot that kind of come along with that as well. So if you're interested in doing that, I would suggest getting the book and giving it to your doctor and say, I want to do this. Okay. Yes, The End of Alzheimer's. Yeah, I mean, he's got several others. Yeah, he has one for people who want to prevent getting their dementia, or getting Alzheimer's. So that's available as well. If you go onto Amazon and just say Bredesen, all his books kind of come up. Yes, sir.
You mentioned a healthy lifestyle, and I see one thing kind of as maybe I don't want to say silver bullet, but zinc seems to appear quite often. Is that something you would typically just recommend for anybody over 80?
I've been doing that for years, okay? Zinc.
25 milligrams or something like that?
25 would be fine. The recommendation is not more than 40 a day. And if you take it regularly, you're not going to get deficient. So that should be helpful. Yeah. Vitamin B12 is another one of those. Vitamin D for most of us. In the summer like this, it's hot out there. Yeah, as a supplement. So there are some supplements that do make sense to me. Yes. Yes, ma'am. Both zinc and copper are high. That would kind of unusual. The numbers on those are ideal, at least Bredesen says, are about 100. If you want to kind of remember the levels, that's where they usually, he recommends that they be. Yeah. Yes, in the back. The vascular? Lewy body is different. It's different than vascular. I have seen nothing that the Lewy body dementia that benefits it. Although Dale Bredesen says, as I read his book carefully, because in my mind I wanted to know about Lewy body, he said he did have one patient that improved a little bit, but that may have been two things going on at the same time. We just don't know. So, challenging question. Yes? So she asked, is it okay to take zinc by itself? Sometimes supplements don't get along well together. Zinc is usually absorbed from our food, okay? So I would just take it with food and expect that that's the way it would go. Yes, sir? For zinc, it's just getting the zinc here. Zinc oxide, I suppose, but zinc lozenger is fine. So I would say get the zinc. There is, let me see if I can get it right here. There is one way you can get it, and my brain is missing on it now. I don't think it's dementia, okay? There is one salt of zinc where it makes it excrete in the kidneys faster. But it's not going to take all of it out. And I'm trying to remember what it is. When I think of it, I will tell you, okay? Yeah, I apologize.
Is there any other test you would recommend for us folks that are over 80 other than a CBC and a CNP?
There are, yeah, I think it's reasonable to do testing as we get over 80. My own practice was as often as the insurance company would allow me, I would check a vitamin D level. Especially because we tend to be inside. B12 level, they tend to go low. The things that tend to go low as we get old, which would include magnesium, which is, the blood test is not real accurate, but at least it gives you a direction. If you're on the low side, you know it's okay to increase it. Zinc, chromium is another one of those, although that's more a blood sugar issue. I haven't seen anything on the brain. Let's see, we talked about lithium. That's not going to do you any good. I wouldn't bother checking that. Those are kind of basics for me. Again, if you get Dr. Bredesen's book about how to, prevent dementia, he's got a list in there that he'll recommend for you, and then you can show that to your doctor and say, do this. Okay, I see a hand back there, and I'll go over here. I do not know white matter. There's sometimes little kind of holes in the white matter. That can be from vascular, and there's a lot we don't know about it. So I don't know, can't help you with that. What about supplementing with iodine? Supplementing with iodine is not necessary if you're using, table salt, because they put it in there to keep us from getting goiters, right? Thyroid goiters. So if you want to take a little bit, I wouldn't argue with you. We don't need a lot. It's a very small amount. So, let's see. Thought I saw another hand. Yes. The iodized salt, has iodine in it. I don't know that would be a problem. Getting it in regularly is important. If you know you're low, then more would make a lot more sense at first to try to get it up. Yeah, but our actual RDA for it is not that high. So your 25 3 times a week should not be a problem. Yes?
As we age, I understand that our digestibility decreases anyway, so you don't break down foods as well.
Mm-hmm.
Is it beneficial to do a digestive enzyme to assist that?
She asks, is it beneficial to take a digestive enzyme? As we get older, our bodies tend to make less acid and less of the digestive enzymes, in the stomach. We do have digestive enzymes further down the track, but the stomach often empties a little bit slower, and some things have a hard time getting in. For people who have a hard time, I've often recommended digestive enzymes. There are very expensive ones, and then there are some that are not so expensive. I would usually start with something like Phazyme, which is pretty much over-the-counter digestive enzymes that help your body digest while things are in your stomach. Usually those are inactivated by acid as the acid in the stomach builds up, and then hopefully your liver and gallbladder are working like they're supposed to. Well, you've spent an awful long time listening to me talk, and I've enjoyed the time together. I hope you found it helpful. I suppose we should wind up here and let folks go.
I want to thank you for coming today. Really appreciate it. Good information. Just want to remind everyone that Dr. Guthrie has a book called
Eat Plants, Feel Whole.
And in there, it does talk about many of the supplements. It's a very good read, and menus, etc. He also has a program by the same title. It's a 4-week program, and he did it for us this past February here at our church during Wednesday Night Out. Our next Wednesday Night Out will be coming this September, October. Watch for the times to be announced, the days and times, and we will be again presenting that program. Not Dr. Guthrie, he will not be able to join us, but we will be presenting that program and encourage each one of you to come if you can and participate there for more information. Yes?
So the question is, are there geographical areas of the world which are more likely to have dementia than others? There are nutrients which are soil dependent. For example, if the soil is iron deficient, your plants are probably going to be iron deficient as well. Zinc is one of those. Interestingly, lead is also one of those that is taken up by plants. Arsenic is another one that is. The arsenic in rice is coming from the soil. So yes, the soil does make a difference in what's actually in the plant when we eat it. The most recent one I became aware of, I shared with you, lithium is helpful for rats. We have evidence from humans that where there is a lot of lithium in the soil, there's less dementia. So that's kind of one of those observational sorts of things. So yes, it does make a difference, and that's been reported. So.
One last question in the back.
The last slide. So this is the one that actually has Dr. Bredesen's website on it. So, yeah, that's Dr. Bredesen's, or at least the company that's doing the cognoscopy, is what he says, to do the test on it. I'm happy to provide the slides,
And I will post them on the church's health ministries website. Well, it's the health ministries page on the church's website. So we will post it there. Again, yes.
May I close with a word of prayer?
Absolutely.
Okay, good. Father in heaven, we are thankful for how you have put us together. We are fearfully and wonderfully made. We live in a world where there's sin and trouble, and we live with consequences. Thank you for what you have taught us in your word, that which you have revealed we're thankful for. We're also thankful for the scientific process and ask that you will give us wisdom as we kind of approach it, that you will enable us to do the things that will help us to serve you longer and better. We know that you want nothing but our best health. Thank you for guiding us in our life journeys. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you for coming.